In this exercise, we're going to take the recover middleware that we created in the last exercise. So I have that linked here. And we're going to start with a main.go that is similar to the final version of that, but not quite exactly the same. And we're basically just going to expand upon it to make it a little bit better. And in the process of doing that, we're going to look at how to use the Chroma package, which I have linked here. It is, I didn't mean to hit that button. It is a third-party package that allows you to do syntax highlighting. So there's a library called Pigments in Python that is one of the more common ones that you'll see people using. So this is a replacement for that written in Go, and it's pretty cool. So I wanted to get a chance to mess with it in these exercises. But specifically, we just want to go ahead and make middleware that is useful whenever we're writing web applications and debugging them. So we're going to first create an HTTP handler that will render the source files in the browser. And before we get to the next couple steps, this might not make a ton of sense. Why would we want to just render source files in the browser? But as we get to these later steps, it'll become much clearer why we need that. And I should mention that when building this part, if you want to build it completely separate from the existing code, that's fine. If you just want to build a standalone HTTP server in a brand new main.go file, go for it. That's an easy way to go ahead and set this all up without confusing yourself. But long term, we're going to want to add it to the dev middleware function that we have that's inside of main.go. So essentially, we're going to want it to be a part of that function that provides us with the panic recovery type stuff. And you'll see as we do these exercises how you can do it. So if you're a little bit at a loss as to what to do, don't get too worked up about it. Try to figure it out on your own. But if you can't, you'll see how we can use the HTTP serve mux in order to do it. So the next thing is syntax highlighting. Again, we're just going to be taking that handler that we created in step 1 and using the Chroma package to make it so that when we render these pages, we highlight the code with some syntax highlighting. I'm going to come down through here. I think is there an example here? There we go. So you'll see here that there's a style gallery that'll give you a little bit of an example of what to expect here. You're welcome to choose whichever of these themes you want. I'll probably just sort of pick one at random. Maybe I'll use Dracula because I think that's the one that I'm it's the one I'm using in VS Code. So maybe I'll use something like that. But basically you just want to make it so that your syntax highlighting when you render source files in this HTTP handler. So then finally we're going to get to part 3, which is where it's going to start to make a little bit more sense as to why we wanted to be able to render source files. So part 3 is where we're going to be building a regular expression. Well, technically you don't have to do regex, you can do whatever you want, but we're going to figure out a way to parse out the source code, the source files, out of our stack trace. So we're going to go back to this dev middleware, and we're going to get something like this, which is a stack trace. And what we want to parse out is this part here. So this full path that points to some Go file or some other source file. And I mean, realistically, for what we're doing, it should always be .go files. So when we're parsing out of the stack trace, you can keep that in mind. So we want to pull this part out. And then if you can, you also want to grab the line number here. So try to figure out a way to parse all of these out of here so that you have them and you can do something with them. So then step 4 is where we're going to take those pieces that we parsed out, and we want to use those to create links to the handler that we created in step 1. So essentially what we're going to do is we're going to take our stack trace, we're going to find any source file like paths like this, and we're going to parse them out. We're going to turn that into a link to our source code rendering handler so we can click on these paths and then go to that source code and view the actual source code. So the idea at the end is that when we do get a stack trace and our dev middleware handler does end up rendering a big stack trace like this, we can easily click on any of these parts that have the source file and we can quickly go try to figure out where did this panic. And I know that normally when you're on local development, you're going to have your editor right there and you can go look at stuff. But sometimes it might be a little bit annoying, especially maybe it's in another package or maybe it's something in the standard library. Who knows, maybe something else went down and you just want to be able to jump into the code. So I find it really cool to have this sort of thing built right into the error page, especially for local development. Now, in production, you don't want that there because obviously you don't want to be giving people access to your code. But, for local development, it's cool to have that so you can quickly jump to the root of the problem and try to debug it. And then finally, step 5 is a really small step in my opinion, but Chroma has support for highlighting a specific line number. So we're going to be adding line numbers, which I don't even think I mentioned here, but you probably want to add line numbers. And then you can also go through and look at the line highlighting, which is one of these options. And with it, you can tell it which line you want to highlight. So if you parse out the line number from these source files, so that'd be this last part, this :28, or on this one, :96. All of these are the line number where the stack trace sort of came from. So you want to go ahead and just highlight them so that if I click this specific link, that it highlights line 96. So I quickly know, if I scroll through the file, where the actual panic came from. And let me go back here. That should be everything. I have some links here at the bottom and some links in the README that should help you, get going with this. This is an exercise that you can build it on your own. I need to get a screenshot added in here, something that shows you what you're going to be building. But you can build it on your own. It's not, entirely impossible to try to build, but it's really hard to sort of describe what we're going to be building in the videos, while also keeping it vague enough that it is an exercise that you can just sort of practice on your own. So again, I'll say that if you want to do the exercise on your own, what I really recommend is just take the middleware we have and just make it useful for you in development. So if you were building a web application and it panicked, what all could you add there to make it easier for you to figure out, where the panic came from or why you had the panic? We're going to start by creating an HTTP handler that's going to render source files in our browser. So it's going to be relatively simple. It's pretty vague here, and as I said, it's left pretty vague because I just want you to sort of dive through the exercise and try to get all the things working. But I don't really want to tell you exactly all the things that you have to do, or I don't want to force you down a specific path. If you want to try a different route, I want you to be able to do that. So what we're going to be doing here is just creating an HTTP handler that's going to render our source files, which means that we need to be able to open file and go, and I'm just going to Google it. And I'm Googling it because I want to just make this clear that no matter how experienced you are as a developer, there are going to be times where you don't remember how to do something because you just don't do it very often. A great example of this is if you're writing a bunch of server code or server-side code and you aren't opening source files very often, this is probably not going to be something that sticks in your head, and that's okay. So Googling this sort of thing is fine. It doesn't mean you're a bad developer or you don't know what's going on. I just want you to realize that as long as you know what the code's doing and you can Google this example and quickly get it and run with it and make it work, that's great. The problem tends to be whenever you Google this and you plug it into your code and you don't really understand what it's doing. So I just want to reiterate that Googling stuff does not mean that you don't know what you're doing. It often just means that you didn't remember this because you don't use it very often. And, this is one of those cases for me where I open up files pretty often, so I remember this one, but there are a lot of things where I'll forget them, and I'm just trying to show you what I would do in those cases. So I've got this code snippet. In here, I'm going to want to render a source file somewhere. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do mux.handlefunc. I'm going to add something like, let's just do debug / and this will take anything under the debug path now. Then I'm going to put source code handler is the last part. Then we're going to do func source code handler. And we want these two. Then I'm going to go ahead and put inside of here, I want to put some code. So I need to open up a source file. So first I'm going to paste in that code that I just got, I just had from the browser. And this is why I was getting it. I wanted to have this source code because I know that I need to open up a source file in order to render it in the browser. I kind of jumped the gun in grabbing that code, but that's okay. So to start, I don't want to try to parse a source code from the path or from a query parameter or anything like that. I think it's easier just to get everything working with a single static source file and then to come back and plug that part in. So I'm going to open up my browser or my terminal, and I'm going to just ls here, and you'll see that there's a main.go, and it's inside of this current directory that I'm in. So I can actually copy that directory, and I can say path is going to be this / main.go. So we'll start by just opening the main.go, the source file that we're working on, and we'll render that in the browser every time for now. So I can take all of this and I can uncomment it. I can take this part here and replace it with path. And you'll notice that I'm using the absolute, or a full path here. So I'm not using one relative to wherever I run my program. That's probably a good idea for what we're doing in this handler because, with the stack trace, we don't know what it's going to be relative to where our code's being run from. So it's a good idea to try to do this. The other thing is that I'm expecting this to be run on a development machine. Specifically, what I mean by that is if you build a binary and ship it off to another computer and run this code, there's a very good chance that this source code might not be on that computer. So again, this is supposed to be a development tool, and we're expecting all these source files to be on this local computer. So here we're going to change this. We'll do http.error, and we'll do w_error.error. And again, I'm just printing out the error directly because, let me go ahead and get this. I'm printing out the error directly because we are in development with this. This isn't meant to be something we're going to be shipping off to end users or anything like that. And then finally, we want to take what's in file and we want to copy it to the response writer. So the best way to do this, or the easiest way, I should say, is just io.copy. And we're going to say destination is going to be W, and the source is the file. And I think this can return an error if you want to. Yes, it can return an int64 or an error. So if you want to grab those values back and do something with them, you can. I'm just going to go ahead and render them like this because, again, this is a development thing. If there is an error of some sort, I assume we'll just see a blank page and we'll infer that something's wrong with our code. So let's see if this is working. And to do that, well, we can just go to /debug. I'm going to move this down though and move this up. All right, so now I'm going to run my code, go run main.go. I'm going to come back here and I'm going to go to localhost 3000/debug. And you'll see here that we're getting an issue. When we try to open this, there's no such file or directory. So my guess is that this tilde here is what's causing the issue. So let's go ahead and get the full path right here. And if you're following along with this coding exercise, you'll probably want to do something like pwd inside of your directory to get the full path. If you're in Windows, it's going to be a little bit different. Just make sure you get the full path so that you can actually open up the source files relative to where your operating system has them. Also, these slashes might be in a different direction on, if you're on Windows, so just keep that in mind. I'm going to delete this comment actually. And I'm going to go run main.go. Now let's come back here, and now we have the source file. Now that we have the this page rendering a source file, the next thing we want to do is figure out how can we make the path part more dynamic, and how can we pull it out of every request so that we can actually use it. The thing that makes this a little bit tricky is the fact that paths are a little bit different in both a Unix-based system or a Windows system. Specifically, the slash direction is a little bit different. If I recall correctly, Windows is backslashes, and a Unixy system is going to be forward slashes. So as a result, you'll often you can't use the same code to necessarily process both unless you really think about that. So what I want to do is I just want to think, all right, what's the simplest way for me to go about getting this without having to take that into account? How can I do that without really worrying about it? I just want this whole thing to be passed as a single string. So we're not going to stick it as part of the path up here, at least not as part of the regular part of the path. We're going to stick it as a query string. So I'm going to do http golang, come here, and I'm looking for anything with, querying. So this first part, form value, is what I want, but I want to look through here and figure out this part right here. Form value calls parse multipart form and parse form if necessary. Okay, so I wanted to find that because I know that whenever you go to get form values, or whenever you go to process a web request and get the query string, you need to make sure it was parsed in some way. And this parse form is the function that does that inside of the request object. But if this is going to do it for us, we actually don't need to write that parse form code. We can just jump straight to form value. And the way this works is inside of our request, we would do something like path : equals r.formValue. And then we would pass in some string like, say, path. So I'm going to comment this part out, and I'm going to copy all of this, come back to my request, and I'm going to do a question mark, which means that we're now defining the query string parameters. Path equals this. I'm going to get rid of the quotes. But before I actually hit enter here, restart. Actually, I'll restart my server and just show you what this does. I didn't mean to do that. Path equals, let me come back here and copy it again. Hit enter. Okay, this seems to be working. Every once in a while you might have a path here that has a space in it or something like that. And in those cases, this might not work because you might need to encode some of this. I think Chrome does a pretty good job of just encoding stuff for you. So if you're in Chrome, this might work, whereas in other browsers it may not. But once we start to write our code, you'll see that later in this exercise, when we start to write the code that actually builds these URLs, it'll handle that sort of thing for us, so we aren't going to have to worry about, manually fixing that type stuff. Okay, so we've got main.go, we've got readme.markdown, and you'll see that all of these get rendered inside of our page. So this appears to be working the way we expected. So I believe that's everything. In the next video, we're going to go ahead and take this and we're going to make it a little bit better with some syntax highlighting. I'm trying to think if there's anything I'm forgetting here. No, I don't think so. I think we should be good here. If you are having issues with this path part, look for something like your own code online. It'll be like a page like this. You can paste something in here and tell it to encode, and you'll see here that it'll give you some other path. So here I could paste this in, hit enter, and you'll see that it's still working. So yeah, I'm guessing there were issues with that last one, just Chrome is doing it for me. So if you're using a browser that isn't Chrome, you'll want to make sure this stuff is encoded, because I don't think Chrome actually does this for regular links. I'm pretty sure this is only if you manually type it in up top and hit enter. It will know that, you're a user. You probably just didn't know to encode that stuff. Whereas, a web page with a link, it's going to expect to sort of know a little bit better. Okay, so that's it for this this video of this exercise. So step 2 is going to be adding syntax highlighting to our source file rendering. And to do this, we're going to use the Chroma package. So I'm going to go ahead and open that up. And then I'm also going to go down through here and find the link to Pigments and open that up. So Pigments is one of the earlier syntax highlighting, or at least one of the most common syntax highlighting libraries, but it's written in pure Python. So Chroma is meant to be sort of a replacement for this, or maybe a similar version to what that is, but written in Go. So it says here it's based heavily on Pigments, and it uses a lot of the same pigment style lexers and styles and things like that. So really, the reason we're going to be using Chroma instead of something like Pigments, which is a little bit more mature, is that with our tool, it would be ideal if it was all written in Go, so that we didn't have to tell developers, hey, if you want to use our recover tool, you need to go install Python and Pigments. It's a lot easier when you can tell them, just install this Go package and you're good to go. So this is one of the really nice things about having a Go version. We're going to start with this quick start here. So that's this line here. I'm just going to go ahead and copy it all. This is going to use the quick package, which is part of Chroma, and it's going to use the highlight function. And basically we pass in wherever we want to print out the source code, the highlighted HTML or whatever we're generating. This is the source code, which I think is supposed to be a byte slice. We'll have to look at that here in a second. This part here is supposed to be a writer. And then we'll pass in 3 strings here, which seem to be the language, the output format, which is HTML. What that really means is that we want it to generate HTML with the source code and not something else. I don't even know what other outputs it supports, but we definitely don't want anything but HTML. And then lastly, this is like the style or the theme that we're using to highlight our code. So first we need to get this package. So let me go ahead and grab this part. And we're going to go get. So now that we've got it, we're going to grab this line here. And we're going to go back to our code. And we're going to basically try to figure out, we've got a source code handler. And this seems to be opening up a path. So what we're going to do here is we're going to say, paste this in here. So output, where are we going to put all this once we're done with it? Well, I think the response writer is a good place to write all this because, that's where we're sending our responses. The source code, we don't, let's just do package main for now. I think that's what we want there. And then we've got go HTML Monokai. So this part here, if we do quick.highlight, you'll see that the source is a string, so it's not actually a byte slice. And what that means is that we can't take this file that we have and we can't pass it in here. We have to instead, give it a string version. So what we're going to need to do is create some sort of object that we can write all this source code to. So one of the ways we can do this is bytes.newBuffer, I think, and we'll pass in nil here. And then bytes will allow us to io.copy. Into bytes, we'll pass whatever's in the file. And then down here, I think this can return an error. Do this, and I don't think we want colon equals here. So with this, we'll just do an http.error again and return. And then we'll make it down here to this highlight. Again, we're going to copy this error stuff. Although, I actually don't care about the error from quick right now. If there is an error, we just, we're in dev. This is a dev tool, so it's fine, I think. What we're going to do is we're going to replace this with b.string. And that should allow us to take all the source code from the file. Now let me see if io.copy. io.copy returns two things. It returns, I think, an integer and an error, and I don't care about the integer. So we can actually see this if we do io.copy. You'll see here with a little tooltip, it returns how many bytes were written, I think that's what the integer is, and then the error. So we don't actually care about the integer, so I'm putting an underscore here. Okay, so I think that's all of it. I'm going to go ahead and go run main.go. And we need to figure out how to open up one of these files. Sorry, I haven't actually been able to work on these videos for a bit, so I need to remember how I was doing this. We're going to do localhost 3000. And what is this under? I think it's under debug. /debug, and it looks like I have one of these here. Let's do this one. Okay, so my path is this path on my local computer to our main.go file. So you'll see that that file is getting opened up and it's being read, and you can see on the screen that Chroma is actually doing all the syntax highlighting for us. So we've got a pretty nice representation of our source code. So, with just that quick package, we were able to get most of this working. So what we'd really end up doing next, let me go look at the exercise. Okay, parsing the stack trace is the next part of the exercise. But what we'd end up doing next is trying to go through all those different stack trace elements and parsing them so that they, point to this specific thing. Let me go ahead and look here at the exercise to figure out what order we're doing these in. All right, so next we're going to be parsing this, and then we're going to be creating links to the source files in the stack trace, and then we're going to add line highlighting. Our next step is going to be taking our stack trace, so something that looks like this, and parsing out links to files in it. So what we really want to find is things like this, and we also are probably eventually going to want that line number as well, and we want to pull them out of this whole thing to work with. And we want to basically turn those into links that go to our debug handler. So we know we have this, if we copy this part here manually and we go to /debug and then do path equals and paste this in and hit enter, we have this part working, but what we'd really like to do is have all of this automatically linked to that. So that's really what we're trying to get to. Now, to make this happen, there are a couple different ways to do it. For instance, one of the ways we could go about doing this is find any line that starts with a tab, take everything up to this colon character, and just assume that that's the file name. So that's probably one of the easier ways to do this. And then to take every digit after that colon and assume that that's the line number. So let's just go ahead and we'll start with that. I don't think this is going to be perfect. I don't know if you can have a colon and a file name and it will be okay or not here. I've never messed around with it too much. But, this I think is a reasonable start. Another thing you could do is mess around with regular expressions. So we could, create a regular expression that says everything up until the very last colon. And then when we get only digits after that colon, that we know that we have, our file name. But the problem with that is that when we get to regular expressions and parsing them, it can be a little bit more complex. And I don't think we should start with that real complex solution unless you're already familiar with regular expressions. So what we're going to do here is just sort of do what I said. We're going to take this whole thing as a string. We're going to split it up by new lines. And then once it's split up by new lines, we're going to go ahead and look for this tab character and just take everything after the tab up to the colon. So I'm going to copy all of this actually. I'm going to come to our Go file and I'm going to create a function which is make links. It's going to take in trace, which is a string, or we'll call it stack, which is a string. And it's going to return a new string, which is going to have the links embedded into it. So for now, we're going to come up, well, this is fine right now. I'm going to go ahead and just paste this in here, and I'm going to comment it all out, just so I can reference it if I want to. So as I said, we want to do strings.split maybe, and we need to figure out a separator. Well, I want to go to the strings package real quick. And I'm going to see if they have, some way to, let's do strings, split, line, golang. So it looks like this is just saying use the n. That was a bad example up there, but you have to use the n character, which is a new line. There's a small chance that you have a Windows version of a new line, which is a little bit different, but I don't think the Go compiler is going to return. I don't think the Go stack trace is going to return that. I'm not positive. It doesn't have anything here. All right, well, it seems like that would be a good enough way to go about doing this. So let's just go ahead and start with that. So we'll do the string is going to be stack, and the separator is going to be this new line character. And what does split return? So we'll do strings.split, and it looks like it returns a slice of strings. So we'll just say lines equals strings.split. All right, so now that we have each line, we're going to need to build each string that we're returning. So we'll say builder equals strings.new string. I thought it was string builder. There it is. And I want to do something real quick here. I'm looking at the builder here to make sure. All right, a lot of these methods are pointers, so we might want to put an and in front of this because of the fact that a lot of them are pointers, but that's kind of up to you. I'll leave it like this for now, and if I need to change it, I will. And for those of you who aren't using Go, I think it's 1.10, maybe 1.9, one of those newer versions. The builder is relatively new, so you might need to use something else if you're not using one of the newer versions. I actually intentionally used, if I can scroll up here, I used bytes.new buffer instead of the string builder up here because I knew that that was available in older versions, so you could probably get away with using a byte buffer as well here. And what we're going to do is we're going to say for each line in the range of lines, with each line, we want to go ahead and try to make a link. So if line 0 is equal to the tab character, well then, we can sort of assume that that might be source code. So then we would want to do something like parse out the link. And maybe we'll do some extra work here. So actually we could do something where if it's not equal to this, that way our happy path is sort of not indented here. So if it's not equal to the tab character, we know that builder equals builder dot write string, and we're going to add line plus a new line character. So I think adding that new line character, remember that we split it on all the new lines, so we need to add that at the very end. Actually, we don't need to do that right now. I'm going to get rid of this builder because we don't need that. We're not going to do anything if it's not that, so I'm going to say continue. Otherwise, we need to parse out this link. And then to return, we're going to return strings.join. So join will allow us to take a slice and join all those elements with some character. So I'm going to join lines with the new line character. So that's why I didn't need that string builder. I can just actually take this lines thing and return it, and I actually want this to be in quotes because it wants a string, not a single byte. So this is a single quote here because I'm checking a single, byte with this part here, and that's what I'm doing. Okay, so assuming that we have a link, so we start with a tab, we think we have a link. What we want is something like the first character in the line, that is a colon. So we'll say for each character, technically these are going to be runes, I believe, but in the range of line, and I'm going to actually keep the index, if this is equal to a colon, then we're going to go ahead and say we need to pull out this source file or the file. So we'll do file equals empty string, file equals line from 1 to I, and then we're going to say I. Actually, we don't need that. Okay. And then we're going to break. So that once we get this file out of this, so what we're doing here is we're iterating through this whole string. So we've got a string that's something like, let me grab this one right here. We've got a string that looks something like this. Let me put it in quotes just to make life easier. We're going to look at every single character in it. So we don't have to look at character 0 because we know that character 0 is that tab. So I'll just put a space there for that for now. And basically we're going to look at each single character, and as soon as we hit this colon here, we know that we've hit the end of the .go file. So we're going to say is whatever was in index 1, so it's here, all the way up to I, which is where this colon is, but we're not going to include it. That's why it's the last index. So all of this part here is what we're going to put in file. So now we know that this is the file name. And then we're going to break because we no longer need to be inside of this for loop. So now that we've went ahead and we've broken out of that, the next thing I want to do is to create a link out of this. So I need to first turn this part here into a URL encoded value, because really what we want to say is we want to say line at, I'm going to put li up here for line index, line at line index, or lines at line index. So I'm going to take this line string and I'm going to replace this index is going to be equal to a href equals, let me cancel out this quote here. In here, we're going to put something like /debug, question mark, path equals, whatever this path is. So we'll just put file for now. Plus file, plus, and then we'll go back on with this. And then inside of here, we're going to go ahead and put plus file. And then we're going to add line from length of file onwards. So really what we're saying is we're going to take this part here out. We're going to stick it into file. And then once we do that, we're going to take this whole part of this code here. And I need this to be +1, because I want to make sure I'm including that tab. So we're going to take this whole section here, and we're going to replace it with this ahref link. So we're going to give it a link that points to a /debug with this path variable pointing to file. And then inside of it, we're going to put the text for the link is file. And then after all of that link, we're going to put we're going to leave that be, and we're going to put the colon and everything else, all of this stuff that comes after it. We're just going to stick the rest of that was in line back in there. So this is probably a little bit confusing without seeing it in action. So let's just go ahead and try this out and see how it works. I don't need this anymore. And I know there's a couple bugs with this, but I'm just ignoring those for the time being. I just want to get this working. So we can say make links with this, and that should, hopefully be working. Let's go ahead and stop, rerun the server, come back. Let's go here and refresh. All right, looks like we did something wrong. So debugging this, we got index out of range. So the question is, what went wrong? Let me look down here. Main.go 101. And it looks like this is the issue. So if the length of line is equal to 0, continue. So we could actually put this in front. So if that's the case, either one of those. So now let's go ahead and just start this up again. Okay. So we're missing our tabs at the start of these. I know there's an issue with these links, which I'm going to fix here in a moment, but it's sort of working. We can still click on these and they seem to be doing something. If you're in Windows, they might not work. I'm not sure. Depending on the operating system you're on, who knows? But we got something kind of working. So here we want to add a tab, and usually in HTML, these tabs don't matter, especially because the HTML, you format everything with HTML elements, but because they're inside of a this whole thing's inside of a pre tag, they actually do matter here. So we have that. The other thing we're going to want to do is fix this file part. It might have characters that we need to encode. So we can do URL value, Golang. And what this is a way to easily construct a key value, like a key value map of URL values. So you basically create the URL values, you set them, and then you use this encode, and it'll give you encoded versions of them. So I'm going to go ahead and just copy this. We're going to set path, and then we're going to set it to be the file. And then we're going to go ahead and say, instead of file here in the path part, we're going to do v.encode, and then we're going to close off that link. So I think that's the first two major parts. Again, this isn't perfect, but it should be, somewhat decent. Now let's go ahead and restart the server. let's come back here. And this looks to be about right. I don't know if we had tabs before, if it was just a single space. You know, that seems especially big, but that's okay. All right, now let's make sure our links work still. And you'll see here that this is much, you know, it's got encoded values. And before this didn't matter because Chrome seemed to be fixing that for us. But, you know, that could, depending on your browser and everything else, that could cause issues. So we definitely want to make sure those are encoded. And I think this is working. You know, we can look at our main.go here. That's the file that we just wrote, actually, or that we're working on. We can look at the server.go. All right, so these links are all working. The question is, at this point, does it make sense to parse out line numbers or not? I think we can do that as a later exercise. I think I even have that written up as part of the later exercises here. And I did 3 and 4 here in kind of the same steps, so I'm not so sure that doing that all as one would have helped. And I have a regular expression link here. I will mention that if you are using this, I need to update that link. The rego here at the bottom is much better, I think. But anyway, we did 3 and 4 here, so that's kind of what we did. And we didn't use regular expressions to do it, but that's mostly because I decided that for now, this is going to be a little bit simpler. And the main reason I decided this was going to be simpler, in case you're wondering, is because I knew that we were going to need to get this file out and encode it with this URL.values. And with regular expressions, that's a little bit trickier, because usually with a regular expression, you can replace with substring, you know, with regular expression matches, but you don't really have as much of a chance to parse them. So you kind of have to pull out the matches, run them through your parsing here with the encoding, and then put them back in, which is kind of obnoxious. So I thought this would work pretty well. Okay, so I think that's it. I'm going to go ahead and get rid of all these comments for now for the make links. That should give us a rough version of this, and in the next video, we're going to look at how to add line highlighting and how to parse out the line numbers so that we actually have that through the rest of this. And actually, yeah, I think we'll do that on the next step. All right, on to the next video. In this video, what we're going to be doing, if I can go back here and get this, let me refresh this because I changed this up a little bit, is we're going to be doing step 4 where we're adding line highlighting. So in the last video, we kind of did 3 and 4 at the same time, so I updated the README to reflect that a little bit better. And I also got rid of some of the regex stuff because I opted not to use that in this specific case. But for step 4, we're going to be doing line highlighting. And there's really 2 parts to this. One is getting the line number out of the stack traces so that we have it. And the second is going to Chroma and adding a way to do line highlighting. And the Chroma part's probably going to take a little bit more work because we can't use that quick package that it provides. We have to actually set up a lexer and a formatter and some of that stuff. But, you know, we'll be able to set a little bit more customization options whenever we do highlighting, so there is some benefit to that. But first, let's just go ahead and kick off by getting the line number here. And I think the easiest way to do this is to do something like for, let's say I : equals length of file plus 1. I is less than the length of line I++. So really what I'm saying here is we're going to start at whatever character is at, you know, wherever we got this file name. We know there's a tab in front of it, so we have to add 1 to whatever the length of it is. So we're going to go ahead and say, you know, in this original stack trace string, let me look for one here. Grab this one. So in this original stack trace string where there's going to be a tab. So we've got tab, which is 1 character, so that's where the +1 is. And then we've got length of whatever this file name is, so this part here, the .go stuff. And then actually we should probably add 2 here because we're going to also count for this colon. So that's where we're getting +2 now. And we're going to start from there, and we want to make sure we keep iterating or incrementing I as long as we're going up through these characters here. In this specific case, we're going to be looking at bytes. And we're going to try to figure out all these numbers here. Now we can iterate over this in this particular case because I actually don't care about runes because I'm just looking for numbers, which I know are going to be single bytes. So here we should be fine. That is something you need to kind of worry about with strings in general, is that sometimes runes are more than 1 byte long. And if we're using these integer indexes, instead of iterating over a string like we did here with this range, you're not going to get specific runes. But I think in this case, it's fine. And what we're going to do here is say if the character, if line I is, let's see, if it's less than 0 or line I is greater than 9, we're going to break. And before this, I'm going to say line number is going to be the empty string. Otherwise, we're going to say line number equals line number plus line I. And this is going to complain because this isn't a string. Yep. Okay, so this is obviously not super efficient. We could be using something like a string builder or something else to speed this up. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's say line number, we'll say line string is going to be strings.builder. And then, actually, we could probably do something like this. And then we can say line string.write byte, and we'll pass in line of I. Get rid of all of this. And so basically what we're saying here in this first if is if the character is less than 0 or if the character is greater than 9, then it's not in that range from 0 to 9. And this works because I know that if you look at the byte values for the character 0 and the character 9, that they're actually going to be in the order 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So this is actually how their byte values are. So say 0 has a byte value of like 20. We can actually look this up. Byte value 0. Or it's more like the ASCII character set here, but I'm looking for... so look, right here we got the value of 48 for the character 0. 49 is the value for the character 1, 50 for 2, and this goes all the way up to 9. So really what we're ending up saying behind the scenes is if the character's byte value is less than 48, or if it's greater than 57, so less than 48, or if it's less than whatever's that character 0 has, or if it's greater than 58, or whatever that character 9 has, then we know that it's not within that range of the characters we care about here. So this is one handy thing when we're dealing with the these integers, is that they all fall sequentially, so we can do something like this. So if it's not a number character, we're going to break because we're done in this loop. Otherwise, we're going to go ahead and add whatever that byte is, because it is a number, to our line string. And then finally, we're going to say line is going to be strconv.a to I, and we're going to pass in line string.string. And I think a to I can return an error, maybe? Oh, didn't mean to split this. So yeah, it returns an integer and an error. So we're going to do line, comma, error, and if error is not equal to nil, well, really, we should just say line equals 0, I guess. That should be fine. So we could probably handle this a little bit better, put a debug statement or something, but for now, I think I'm just going to let the line be 0. And then we can come down through here and we can say v.set line, and we can set it to line. And another thing that's interesting here is when you look at v.set, it's actually looking for a string value here, so we don't even need to do this parsing stuff. The biggest upside to that is that we are, essentially whenever we do that parsing stuff, we're verifying we only got a number. But since all we were doing was just setting it to 0 anyway, we can just take whatever's here and just slap it in here and just hope that it's right for now. And then in our debug handler, we can try to handle it a little bit better. Okay, is there anything else I need to do here? Oh, I need to take this line and get rid of it. And I've got a compilation error. So it looks like I'm closing out something. Not really sure where my bug is. It looks like it was this. Oh, I don't need these two. That's why. Because I did var line string string builder or strings.builder instead of line string : equals strings.builder, I don't need these two brackets here because I'm just doing it this way because I know the 0 value is fine. Okay. So I think that's going to get me the line number. The only thing I really want to do now is to figure out, how can I replace the link so that it includes the line number. So here we've got the file, but we also want to include the colon, and we also want to include the line string. Dot string. And then down here, we're going to say the length of the file +1, and we're going to say +2 for that colon character now because we're writing it up here ourselves. And then we're going to add the length of line string dot string. And I think that's roughly what we want. So this should include that line string now. And all this is getting kind of complicated. It might make more sense to sort of parse it out into something a little bit easier to manage. But I think for the time being, I'm just going to let it be and see if I can get it working. So let me go run main.go. Let's come back here, refresh. And it looks like we're now including, this isn't part of the link, but the number in the colon is part of the link. So if we click on it, we're looking up here at these parameters, and you'll see we have line equals 47 and path equals, this URL encoded path. So it looks like we got that 47 out, and this one looks like we're getting line 67 out. So we have all that working now. All right, cool. So this is all good to go for now. It's not like the most amazing code, but it does work. I can say that regular expressions or other things like that might have been easier in the long run, but I think what we did was fine. We got to sort of mess around with the string builder. We really got to, dive into some strings a little bit, so it wasn't a terrible exercise. So the next thing we're going to do is Chroma. So with this quick package, we want some way to add line highlighting for a specific line number. And we're going to say line string is going to be r.form value line. Then we're going to say line comma error is going to be we want strconv.a to I line string. And then we're going to say if error is not equal to nil. In this case, we're going to say line equals -1, and I'll explain to you why we're doing that a little bit later. Essentially, what we're going to do, it's going to say we're not using it. Okay, down here, eventually, I'm going to put underscore equals line just so it's covered for now. What we're eventually going to do down here is we're going to say if the line is less than 0, then we don't need to highlight any specific lines. But if the line is greater than 0, then we're going to highlight specific source code lines. And that way, when we're doing quick highlight and everything, we can sort of decide what we want to do based on that. Okay. We're going to go back to Chroma. I'm going to click this line highlighting link. And you'll see that we have the HTML formatter here. And this is the part that has all of these specific options. And really, the HTML formatter is the thing that says, whenever we're looking here at the source code, we're saying we want the output of HTML. But you can also create a formatter with specific options. So that's what's happening here, is they're creating a formatter with some very specific options. And all I really care about here is this top line. Well, I could get these two both, but I don't really necessarily want both. I'm going to get this top part, copy it. And what we're going to do here is we're going to say formatter is going to be html.new, and then we're going to pass in the options we care about. So one of the options I care about is, let's see, tab width. We can use that one. html.tabWidth. We'll set it to 2. And I'm going to hit save just so it pulls in some of these. And then I'm also going to do html.highlightLines. Well, this is where we'd be highlighting some lines, but I don't necessarily know if we have any of those yet, so I'm going to let that be. And then we want with line numbers. So I'm going to go ahead and grab that one. html.withLineNumbers. So we'll start with those two. And then what we'll say is lines is going to be, well, highlight lines. Let me go ahead and just call it here so you can see. html.highlightLines takes in a slice of arrays that just have 2 values. So really it's saying you give it something like this, where everything inside of this slice is going to be an array of 2 integers that says the start and the end of where you want to highlight. So, in our case, we only have one specific line that we want to highlight. So this doesn't really make as much sense. We don't have a lot of start and ends. Our start and end is going to be the same thing. So what we can do here, and I don't know if they're inclusive or exclusive. It doesn't really seem to say. So we'll just try this out. We're going to start off by saying lines is just going to be this thing. you know, it's this 2D slice, and that's fine. We could even do var lines int, something like this. And then we're going to say if line is greater than 0, lines equals append lines, and then we're going to pass in a 2D array, or sorry, an array of integers where the start and the end are both line. And if it ends up we need to add one to this, we will. But for now, I'm going to let it be. Now we can get rid of this line. All right, so we're just declaring these lines. Then if line is not -1, so that means it was passed in and we had something to parse. I mean, we didn't have an issue parsing it. We're going to go ahead and add it to this lines slice. And then down here, whenever we create our formatter, we're going to say html.highlightLines. And we're going to pass in these lines. All right, so this is currently complaining because we don't use the formatter. So what we really want is a way to format our HTML, or sorry, format our code into HTML. So that's why we created an HTML.new formatter for this. But that means we still need to call the format function. So if I call format, it expects a writer. Well, we want to output this to the response writer, so that's really going to be about the same. And then we need a style. Well, we don't have that, and we don't have an iterator. So we need to figure out where we're getting those two from. And this is where, you know, really we just jump back to the Chroma source code and try to dig through it and figure out where can we get those. Well, here we're seeing iterator. So it looks like the way to get an iterator is to take ioutil.readAll, which is taking whatever our file is and reading all the contents, and then to take a lexer and to then use that lexer to tokenize all of that with nil as the first option is what it's looking like. If I look up here, we want to figure out how to get a lexer then. Well, we want a lexer for the Go language. So, you know, it looks like we can do lexers.getGo. So let's start there. I'll say lexer is going to be getGo, and then we're going to say iterator error is going to be lexer dot, well, iterator, comma, error is going to be lexer dot, what is it calling here? Tokenize. And we want the string of the contents. Well, we already have our contents in this bytes buffer because we copied it all in there. So we can actually just call b.string. So this last part now is just an iterator. Now we just need to figure out how to get this style. So, you know, we need to get this style variable. Well, turns out we were at that spot on the docs. It looks like styles are your themes. So that's what it says here. And this right here, it's getting the swap off theme. We were using the GitHub one, so let's just stick with that for the time being. So we'll say style : equals styles.get GitHub. And it looks like they do something with a fallback here, so we can actually do that as well. I don't think we need it, but we can go ahead and do this. And that's everything we have. Now our formatter should output this. So, you know, we're not getting any compilation errors. It looks like it imported all these packages for us from the Chroma package. So I think we're okay. Let's go ahead and give this a shot. I'm going to come back here, refresh this page, and I'm going to click on one. Ugh, that's not what we wanted. So what's happening? It looks like when we're sending this response, the browser is not realizing that it's HTML. So I'm not sure what exactly is in the page source that it's not realizing that. You know, maybe it's because there's not an HTML tag at the start. You know, who really knows? But we want it to render this as HTML. So there's a couple different ways to fix this. I think the easiest right now is probably just going to be to do something like w.header.set. We'll set the content type to be text/HTML, and then we'll restart the server. And now I'll refresh this page, and that appears to have fixed the issue. You know, it seems to be using it correctly. And it looks like our line highlighting is actually working too. You'll see here at line 24, we've got this whole line highlighted, and this all appears to be working as we expected. Now, there's a couple things you could do to tweak this. For instance, if you wanted to add some custom HTML, maybe you would do w.write, maybe do fprint w, and then you'd put something like style, font size, 2em, something like that. Now we can restart the server, and I believe that will just increase the font size of everything. Well, if I did it right. I apparently didn't. Not really sure what I did wrong there. It's also possible that all of these styles are sort of embedded. I'm not positive looking at this. Oh yeah, all these styles are embedded right now, so we can't really affect that much. I guess we could do... I guess I should probably put all this inside of something. So something like that. Restart. Come back here. There we go. So I've increased the font size of everything. And, obviously this is huge. Probably not what you wanted. But it's, a quick way to just sort of get this up and running. So maybe you just wanted a little bit larger font. And I think I ran into this originally because the font size was pretty small. And it was kind of hard to read, especially if all your other text tends to be bigger. So you don't want to have to zoom in on some pages and zoom out on other pages. So if you wanted to do something like that, you could. But all in all, that got us where we wanted to be. This is line 24. This should be line 67, so you'll see it's highlighted. This would be line 1947, which is way down here. 1947. Yeah, you can see it's all the way down here, but it is highlighted. Long term, it would be great if you could just link people directly to the line that they have. So in this case, it would just link directly to line 505. But I don't actually think Chroma supports that right now. So I suspect in order to do that, you would have to actually go through and update the HTML formatter, maybe take the with line numbers and tweak that a little bit. So let me go look for the HTML formatter. With line numbers, that just has a function. So if you go to the formatter, you'd basically have to come through this formatter and figure out, line numbers. We've got this part here, it's a bool. So now we'd figure out where that is used exactly, and we could try to, go from there and make that work. There might even be another option so that line numbers in a table. Oh yeah, so it looks like here that you might be able to do this with line numbers in a table. So let me go ahead and see if we can get that working. Come back here, refresh, click on this. Oh, that's not what I wanted, I don't think. Huh. Well, maybe you need both options. That's my guess at this point. So html.line numbers in table. So we've added both. I'm going to go ahead and refresh this page. I'm going to go ahead and look at this. Yeah, I'm still not seeing links to specific or IDs or anything like that that would make it easy to link to a specific line number, which is what I was really hoping for. But that's okay. Yeah, I'm still not seeing it. Well, so much for that option. But basically what you might have wanted to do is come back in here and look at these different options and find a way. Oh, I get what it's saying. This is supposed to make it so it's easier to copy paste this code if you didn't want to have the line numbers included in the copy paste. So what you might want is a way to basically set an ID for every line number so that you could then link to something like, at the very end of here, put :123 for line number 123, or sorry, hashtag 123 for, getting it to go to line number 123. So that's where the IDs would be. But to do that, you'd probably have to come in here to the HTML formatter and build your own custom HTML formatter, which wouldn't be that hard. You'd basically have to clone this one and do a couple minor tweaks to it. But, for now that's not there, so we're just going to go ahead and skip that step. Okay, so that's it for this exercise. I know that it was just kind of a lot of jumping around. I haven't been able to record one of these in a little while, so hopefully you'll bear with me as I get back into the groove of things. Hopefully it was helpful, and hopefully you can build some custom tools like this to help make your local development just a little bit easier.